been some really cool things happening lately. A lot of things that God's been revealing to us and showing us, and just allowing us to kind of see more and more of what His plan is for us, even going back as far as 10, 15 years. So it's just super cool to be able to see some of those things come to fruition. So I guess let's start a while ago, maybe talk about even a little bit of how our church began and what that looked like, and kind of what God was doing there.
Yeah, I think the history is pretty cool. We talked in our family gathering the other night, just kind of walked through some of what the history was and things God's done. And even as I went through and highlighted some things, it was just surprising to me even to see some of the major mile markers that we forget about so easily if we don't look back. And South Lakeland Church, which that wasn't the name of it then, but started in a house all the way back in 1948, and then went through obviously a lot of changes. They moved to the property on the corner of Clubhouse and Lakeland Highlands. I think it was 1994 when they officially moved in there and opened up. But the interesting piece of that story was they were actually looking at this property that we're sitting on now, and felt like that was the property God wanted them to have, and they just couldn't seem to work out the details, and so they settled there. And who knew that a few years later, two churches would merge and come together to form a new church, and it would be on that property. So you just see God's promise come full circle and things like that. And there's so many details along the way. I mean, even little things like how fast the merger came together and how well that happened. Most of the advice we got about merger said we would lose 25% of our people, and we really didn't. I mean, you can see how God's hand was all over it. Two churches of two different denominations coming together. That's unusual. So cool things there. Not long after we merged, there was a mortgage that had been used as a down payment on this property that was called, came due immediately. And just to watch how God provided through something like eminent domain at our other property. And it was almost dollar for dollar the exact amount we needed to be able to pay off that mortgage and take care of that, so that we didn't have that debt hanging over our head. And so that was exciting. And then just watching the journey of TBA, building here, part of the goal in building on this property, we doubled the size of our property, but cut our debt in half when we moved here. And that's always been part of our goal, is to eliminate as much of our debt as possible, really to get to a point of being debt free. We've been doing that for a long time, paying extra mortgage payments and extra towards our principal and so forth. And so that's been a cool experience. And but just looking at God's faithfulness, one thing after another, in the smallest of details and then the biggest of details, just showing how His plan has really come together and His dream has unfolded for us as a church.
Yeah, I remember even from my perspective as a youth, like I was probably in eighth grade going into ninth grade, whenever everything was kind of moving and happening, and so it was this buildup of excitement and and joy for what God was doing, and being able to be a part of that was something that was extremely important for me, even at that age, for sure.
Absolutely. And that's, I think back, it was somewhere around 2011 or maybe going into 2012, in that time frame, that really God started laying Highland City on our hearts. That was where that began unfolding, and just watching that unfold was such a cool thing. I remember one particular day in staff meeting, we were sitting around having some conversation, and just, it was something that was on our hearts. We knew that we needed to be into the community. There wasn't a whole lot of real specific socioeconomic needs right around us. And so we just decided, let's drive through the Highland City community and see what God's doing there, and kind of what's going on. And I remember 4 of us piling in a little tiny car and driving all through the neighborhood. And, it was probably a little scary for people watching us drive by, but just driving up and down the streets of Highland City and looking around and just having that sense, that peace of, this is where God wants us to serve. There was no specific plan. There wasn't even a specific dream unfolding yet. It was just, we knew we were called to that community. And I'll never forget that day. That sticks out in my mind so clearly, remembering that. And it wasn't too long after that the house became available in Highland City. Came up for sale right there beside the school. And just even that, watching God's timing play into that, of how that unfolded. We pursued and pursued and pursued. We made offers, and all of our offers were rejected, and there were other contracts that came up on the house. And, it was almost a year process, I think. And I finally almost gave up, basically quit calling the realtor going, if it happens, it's going to be because God says it happens. And,
Right.
a couple months later, out of the blue, we get this call from the realtor again that says, hey, still want to put an offer on the house? And, within a couple of weeks, we had raised the money and bought the house. And man, I remember that offering. It was like 1 week turnaround. We made an announcement to the church. We were moving forward. Our directors had committed and paid the down payment on it. And, we were locked into contract. We made that announcement. The next week we did an offering, raised $107,000 in 1 week to be able to go buy that house. And it was just amazing to see how God worked. So,
yeah, it was interesting because at that point I wasn't at TBA. I was over in Auburndale, and so it was so amazing to me to be able to look back and just see like my family, being able to do these really, really cool things, and just seeing God lead you guys and do that. So. But it's been amazing to see how God has used the Hub House over the past, few years, and being able to see the Homework Club especially, but even groups like our Hope Seekers that meet there, or even the groups that aren't affiliated with us that get to meet there and use the property, use the building, and are able to grow and have different meetings through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope Seekers is a huge one. Our food pantry running out of the Hub House, and now in one of those modulars, and being able to start doing that store that happens once a month, and seeing some of that grow and expand. And there have been even some of our D groups that have met there, and just other people having presence in the property. It's been really cool just to watch how those things have really evolved. Even some things like Celebrate Recovery, doing some ministry stuff down there. Having some events like around New Year's last year, they did a big movie night and some other things, and just cool things that brought the community out and started bringing the community together. It's been cool to see that happen.
Yeah. So God's done some really amazing things, and He's just been continuing to build on this dream. And specifically in Highland City, you guys really felt like God was leading you to owning a whole entire city block. And in Highland City, they're split up into properties of 4 properties on a block, and then kind of different blocks throughout all of Highland City. So what have we kind of seen lately that's kind of forwarded that dream, I guess?
Sure. Well, I think even to go back and think about that original dream, I mentioned a while ago, we drove through Highland City and we knew we were supposed to be doing ministry in the community, but really didn't have a picture of what that looked like. In fact, I remember there was one piece of property kind of in the middle of that community, had a church sitting right in the middle of all 4 parcels combined into one, so one city block. And we looked at it and said, that would be the perfect property, and it was kind of that was what our mindset was.
Yeah.
And then when the house came available, it was like, okay, well, maybe God's changing directions. Let's explore this. And so we went that direction. As we bought that house, I couldn't tell you how many people, as we were buying the house, confirmed what we were already thinking, that we would eventually own that whole city block right there where that house is, to be able to build some kind of community center, some kind of mission, that hub of ministry. That's why we named it the Hub House. We wanted it to be the hub of ministry there in the community. And so we bought the one house, just walking in obedience, taking that next step. You've seen all the things that have unfolded from that. And then really just a few weeks ago, we got a call from a realtor that asked us about the house right behind it. And we didn't even know that house was coming available.
Right.
We knew that the family had gone through some changes. The lady that lived there had passed away, and her son wasn't around as much, and we couldn't figure out what was happening for sure, but had no idea that was coming up for sale. And they called us; it wasn't even on the market. They talked to us and the school board, and gave the opportunity for either to plug in, and so we began to pursue that and just see what it looked like, because we knew that was our next step of obedience in that area. If we were going to own that whole city block, when that opportunity comes up, we got to move.
Yeah.
So we began exploring.
Yeah, and it was super cool. Just seeing, we did a video last week, just kind of showing the vision of everything, but just being able to see kind of an aerial view of that property, and seeing that, like, when we own these 2 properties, it's going to be even more than half of this block itself, which is really cool.
Yeah, they're definitely the 2 biggest properties in that block. And so it gives us a huge chunk of property. In fact, I think it's just about an acre total between the 2 properties that we would end up having. Each one is about a half an acre altogether. This house is actually an even better house structurally than the house we already own. The house we already own is a wood frame house, and while most of it's in pretty good shape, it could stand some repairs and has some things going on with it. This new house has a concrete slab, and it's a block home with brick facing. Just really good bones, good structure. There's a lot of work still to be done inside the house that we'll have to do to make it ready for ministry. But the house itself is in good shape, and it's got a nice garage beside it. It's not a full garage, but a bigger shed, I guess you would say. Probably big enough you could park a car in, but would give us some good storage. And again, it's a slab with block, and so it's good structural kind of storage area there. And so there's a lot of possibilities with this for sure.
Awesome. Before we get into details, we have another opportunity that's kind of presented itself. I guess let's talk a little bit about that and what is the necessity that kind of prompted that?
Yeah, well, and actually, even looking at the timeline of all this again is interesting just to see how God works. The other opportunity you're talking about is the possibility of expanding our building. And this is something we've talked about really for several years, the possibility.
Even when we built the building to begin with, we built it in mind of maybe expanding.
We really did. And there was a phase 2 design from the very beginning that talked about even building a second building. But shortly after we moved in, we ended up going to multiple services, and we had to put in a modular for our kids because we ran out of space there. And, God was just doing some cool things, and you could see that growth that was happening. And so a few years back, we started exploring the possibility of moving our offices. And for a couple reasons. One, our offices aren't ideal to start with. As you and I both well know, we're in cubicles side by side, so we listen to each other's personal conversations, and it's just hard to study.
Each other's lunches.
Exactly. It's hard to study in that environment. Hard to really accomplish much. I mean, if you're doing tedious tasks, no big deal. But when you're trying to have some quiet and think and meditate and do those kinds of things, it's just hard for that.
Yeah.
So we began to explore that possibility. The other piece of that is our modular buildings keep going up in cost. Right. We are leasing those buildings. We didn't purchase them. And we leased them very specifically because we planned for them to be short-term. That was never the long-term plan. And when we leased them, they were very cheap. We were paying, I think it was $500 a month for the 2 buildings to lease them and have both of them. And that was a good deal. And, the modular company, they take care of all the repairs. So when the roof leaks, they come fix it. When the air conditioning breaks, they come fix it. It was a good deal all the way around. Now we're at a place, those prices have gone up and up and up and up to where we're paying $1,500 a month for those 2 modular buildings. It no longer makes any sense financially, but there's not any other great options for what to do with offices and or that kid space. So believe it or not, 3 years ago, the conversation started by discussing the possibility of putting offices and some other space in our shed out in the back and really like fixing it up and making it nicer. Okay. And that didn't seem really cost effective as we explored it. And so from there, then we talked about expanding the building on the side where the shed is. And just talked about that possibility. That'd be the west side of the building. Right. But to do that, it was going to require changing our driveway, changing a lot of our parking. It was just going to be a lot of site and civil work that wasn't, again, cost effective to be able to do that. And so when the numbers came back, it was very clear to us that this wasn't the timing for that, and we just couldn't afford it at the time. And so we just abandoned the idea, basically. So then about, I guess now probably a month or 6 weeks ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that. At this point, the tree over our playground on the other end of our building, we've known for a while it's had some issues, but we've been holding on to it as long as we could. In fact, we moved our building when we built so we could keep that tree because it was such a big, beautiful tree. But it began having some issues that were worse and worse, and we had a tree
around Irma. It started to fall apart. And large branch.
We lost some real large branches around Irma. Did some damage to the playground. Did some damage to the building that we had to repair, etc. But we were still holding on to it, holding hopes. And we had a tree guy come out a couple months ago, I guess it was, and look at it just to trim it. And he came back and said, "This tree's dangerous. You don't want kids playing underneath it. Limbs could fall at any time. There's too much rot." There were just some issues with it. And so when we realized we were going to have to take it out, it just spurred this idea of, okay, if we're taking that tree out, what's to keep us from moving the building that direction, expanding that way? And you don't have the parking to deal with at that end. You don't have all the site work. This may open a different possibility. And so I had lunch with Joe Rada one day with Rada Construction. Most of you know Joe. He runs sound for us and leads our worship part of the time. And but Joe and I talked back and forth, just bounced some really, really rough numbers And when he started throwing some rough numbers at me, I went, that might actually be doable.
Right.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And so we had some more conversations within our staff, and then went to our directors, shared with them. And at that point, we had just ballpark numbers. But it was stuff that made sense where we went, this is a good possibility with the $1,500 we're throwing away every month on our modulars, to add a little bit to that and be able to expand our building and do some different things. Let's talk about it. And we still don't have all the details. We're still figuring out a lot of that, as we'll talk about today. But it at least, there was enough information there that it seemed like it was good to explore and see what God might be doing in it. And it was in the midst of that process, like 2 days later, after he and I talked, that we got that call from the realtor out of the blue for Highland City.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, wow. Expanding the building, we looked at that and went, within our budget and the way God's blessed, we could probably make that work, especially if people give to it. Then the Highland City house comes up and you go, okay, well, we could probably do that. But to think about doing both, I mean, that's scary. It's definitely risk. It's God-sized. So,
and often God will test you in these moments to see, do you really trust me? You know,
absolutely.
Are you really willing to take that leap of faith and just surrender to me and allow me to take care of it, instead of putting it in your own control, which we all struggle with for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's dive into a little bit of the detail piece. I know a lot of people are wondering, what will the building look like? What are the different rooms that are going to be in it? And I know that we don't know a lot of those details yet, but maybe just let's talk about some of the things that we've been talking about and kind of give a rough idea of what we're thinking about.
Well, great question. And the best answer is I don't know for sure. As far as details of what the building looks like and some of the things that are going to happen, we started out by exploring the possibility of a 2-story building, or a two-story extension to our building. And the primary reason being, there's some limitations on our property because of Swift mud requirements with how much footprint we can have. And so we're trying to be conscious of that and not expand too far to where we cause deeper problems that we've got to dig through. So we started that direction. We're finding that there are possibly some financial issues with the expanding and doing 2 stories and the way it's designed. So we're bouncing a lot of things around, but in the grand scheme, there's a few things we want to accomplish. One, we want to get our offices into that building so that we get rid of this modular. That also means getting rid of our other modular for the kids, which means we need at least 1 kids room that would be added in that space. The other piece of that that's been an ongoing issue we've had is our youth space. Our youth currently are sharing the house there at the front of the property along with Spanish Church and a bunch of other groups. And while that works well, and I mean, everything in our building is multi-purpose, so we've always done that. The thing we keep finding is it's not their space. Right. They don't have ownership in it. Yeah. They don't see it as their space. And so it's very difficult to get the kids to want to come and hang out and be a part of things. And we want our students to be able to do that. And so giving them their own space as a part of that was something really important. And then the final piece of that is space for D groups or small groups, just meeting rooms. For D groups in particular, we have found that they do best when they meet at our church property. They're just hard to have a good D group in a restaurant or in a home, because those are usually groups of one sex, like all guys or all ladies getting together. So in the home, you're either having to kick out part of the family to do a meeting, right, or do some weird things. And so it's a lot easier to do it here at the church, but we don't have enough meeting space around our property. Right now, Sherry Carey's pulling her hair out like every day trying to schedule groups and get all that set up. And we need some more rooms to be able to put those groups in and keep expanding that. So those are the things we're hoping to accomplish. Part of the kids ministry dream and moving that room into that building is that we would also do a little bit of remodel in our current building, our existing children's ministry area, really to make our check-in and check-out process a little more efficient. There were some things we learned when we built this building and did that. We did a good job of creating a secure area for our kids, which is really important. But there's some things we've learned since then that we would have probably done a little different in hindsight. And so this might be a good opportunity to correct a few of those things where we have a kind of a pass-through area in our kids ministry to allow parents to check in with their kids and then drop them at their individual classrooms and kind of walk through where you don't have that big line stuck out in the lobby of people trying to check in or out. Yeah. So just some little things like that we're trying to accomplish and hopefully fix several kinds of things with one remodel, basically. So
right. Basically, the the building would be, the extension would be through the hallway where the bathrooms are, right?
Well, yes, actually, it would go right off the end of the building. It would essentially look like the building itself just expanded, just
Right.
got a little longer. Um, if we go 2 stories, then the elevation of the building may go up in this new section. That's still uncertain. Again, a lot of this is, they're still drawing on paper and trying to figure some things out right now.
Right.
But the elevation may go up a little bit, but otherwise the building just kind of extends. And it actually would extend in both hallways. So you have the little hallway that goes into the kids area.
Right.
And part of the idea would be to maybe knock out a section of wall there where that hallway extends a little further and those rooms adjust somewhat, allowing that pass through. But then you would have a larger youth meeting space, kind of a worship area for them and a place they can do games and so forth. And that hallway likely would dump into that room, which the really cool thing about that is it would allow that youth space to actually double as an overflow room for us on Sunday mornings.
Right, yeah.
And that's something that we really would love to have. We've been back at one service now since summer, and that is going very well. We found that for the most part, it's pretty easy on our volunteers.
Yeah.
And
It's
before
definitely a different vibe for sure.
Yes, it does. And not even good or bad, just different.
Yeah.
But we would like to stay at one service as long as we can with our numbers, but we also see how God is beginning to do some really cool things and grow things. And so I know down the road we're going to end up back at 2 services. I'm confident of that. But it'd be nice to have that overflow space where we could grow one service a little bigger before splitting back into 2 services. Then you keep that momentum and keep the number of people up in your room. And it just feels better when you come in. I don't know any other way to explain it. So it would give us that option as well then.
Cool. Well, it's hard to answer a lot of questions that we don't have the answers to, but we promise that we'll try to answer as many of those as we can as we kind of continue to explore what the building looks like and kind of what that is for us. So, moving on, something that we know a little bit more about is the house in Highland City. So, where are we at with that?
Well, we are now officially under contract. In fact, the video that we threw on Facebook today said that we were under contract, and then I mentioned to the church on Sunday morning that while the video said that, we weren't technically officially under contract yet because the seller had some things pop up, and they ended up not signing until Monday morning. But that is now official. In fact, the check is turned in, the deposit check, and that contract is executed, and we're moving forward. We basically came to a sale price of $135,000 for that house, which if you look on Zillow or something else, it's actually valued at around 151 on market value. But with the work that needs to be done inside, it wasn't worth quite that. And so that was the sale price we ended up agreeing to. We're doing the offering on Sunday the 27th to raise money for that. Our goal is to raise $150,000 because we know we're going to need at least $10,000 or $15,000 to get started on the remodel work, just putting floors down in the house, some painting, some fixing up walls, different things that need to be done.
Continue to do
cosmetic
ministry.
kind of stuff on the inside, really, to be able to do ministry. And so those are the things that are unfolding. We technically have until sometime in January to close on the house. I don't anticipate going anywhere near that long.
Right.
My prayer is that we're going to raise the money we need in that offering on the 27th, and we're going to turn around and stroke a check and close and be done and ready to roll. I'm excited to get that going, but we'll just wait and see how God moves and what His timing looks like. So as far as like what we're using the house for, I know that's been one of the questions that's come up a few times. That's probably another one of those where my best answer is I don't know. We don't have real specific plans. I do think there will be some uses around Homework Club in particular. And I think some of the other ministries will use it. It's going to be a good group meeting space, possibly getting some other D groups or small groups that meet in that area in the community. There are several things that could happen. I know one thing Homework Club will be looking to do is run out of that kitchen. The kitchen they're in right now in our current house is very small. It's hard to function around, and quite honestly, the floor is a little scary in a couple places. We need to get in there and do a little bit of work. But this, being a house on a slab, it's got a good solid floor. It's got a big open kitchen with an open kind of dining room area beside it. So it'd be a great place to be able to serve the kids. So I'm sure that at least the food will move there. I know some of the things they've done in Homework Club, doing some bigger group things. It probably would be nice to have both houses where they can, spread those groups out and meet with those leaders and do the things they're doing.
Right.
So, I know there'll be some great things coming from it. To be able to give exact details right now, we haven't talked that far. I mean,
Right.
poor Wade and Danielle, the run our Homework Club, I haven't even had any conversation with them yet as to what that would look like for Homework Club, because we've been worried about just getting the property, and then we'll kind of start figuring that out. So
Yeah, for sure. How big is the house, and I guess how many bedroom, bathroom are we talking about, and also are we thinking about maybe taking out walls or moving stuff around, that kind of stuff?
good question. Again, my best answer is don't know. The square footage of the house is right around 1,500, 1,550. There's a little bit of discrepancy between the appraisal we had done versus what like Zillow or something says where you're pulling information. But right around 1,500, 1,550 square feet, something like that. There is a decent sized living room, a fairly large dining room and kitchen area that kind of connect, or one big open room basically. There are, if I'm not mistaken, there are 3 bedrooms, but one of them has the ability to be split into 2 rooms. Actually has a partition wall in it right now. I think a couple brothers shared that room when they were growing up. And so they had the ability either separated or to have it open and be together. 2 bathrooms, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even 3, but I think 2 bathrooms. And as far as taking out walls and that kind of stuff, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
There may be some of that we do depending on what we determine that use is going to look like. But right now, at a minimum, just coming in and probably putting some sheetrock up in some areas where there's paneling, doing some painting just to clean things up. And then 90%, if not all of the house needs some new flooring put down. In fact, a lot of the flooring is already ripped out and it's just slab that's exposed. So we definitely have some flooring work to do at a minimum.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, it's hard because we don't have a lot of answers to things, but like I said before, we're going to try to explain as much as we can as we get that information as we go through, and you guys will be updated. But real quick, I wanted to talk about just what does ministry kind of look like as we get into these new things, and how can we get volunteers to help out and be a part of it, even past just buying the property or being part of the building or anything like that.
And honestly, that's probably the most important question we could answer. In our family gathering last Sunday night, or 2 weeks ago now, I guess it's been, Jack Weekly made a statement that I thought really summed this up well. And I won't get the wording exactly right, but it was basically, we're wasting our time buying a house in Highland City unless we as a church rally around it to be present in the community and do ministry. And that is huge. I mean, that's just a huge statement. And it is so true. If we don't rally to do the ministry and to serve that community and to show up and be in the community, owning property means nothing. And the purpose of owning this property is not just to have property in the community. It's to be able to have a place, that hub, again, where ministry happens out of. It's about the ministry. It's about saving souls. It's about connecting to people in that community and being able to serve them and love them and show them what it looks like to be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Right.
And so that is key. And I think that's going to be key for all of our ministries. Homework Club, having extra space like this will give them the ability to expand and to grow and to bring in more students. But with more students, that means you have to have more volunteers.
Yeah.
And so having more people rally around that and be able to be a part of that ministry and involved in that is going to be huge. Even our food pantry, as it continues to grow and expand and they're doing more stuff with the store, that's going to require more and more volunteers to help keep that up and running, and that team's going to have to rally around that. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for new ministries to start out of this. As we have the additional space and really start dreaming about that together, I have no doubt that God's going to lay some new ministries on our heart and expand some of that stuff and open opportunities. But that means we have to be obedient as a church family. We've got to rally around that. And when God asks us to do something, we got to move. We got to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, it's no coincidence that God does what he does. We look over the past, 10, 15 years, at least in our church, and we see all the little pieces that he's been moving, and nothing is a mistake, nothing is wasted, everything is used exactly as he wants it to be, including that property being directly next to an elementary school.
Well, and even the perfect timing of that. I mean, we didn't even talk about this the other night, but it just blows my mind to stop and think we planned to do this Halloween event in Highland City back in, I think it was the very beginning of February, when we had our pastor retreat. And at the same time we were planning that was also when we planned the series that we're in right now on the Blessed Life.
Yeah.
You know, and I've mentioned a couple times, if it was me, if it was Bryan Legg making decisions and doing this, I would have never in a million years done Blessed Life at the same time all this other stuff was coming, because you're fighting the perception of we're just all about money and we're trying to get people's money.
Right.
And that's not it at all. In fact, I was thinking Sunday morning, and Sherry wrote me a note in church and said, how cool is it that we're listening to this message today as we're making some of these announcements, and, you know, just seeing God's timing in it. And I went, you're right. And we're not even smart enough to strategize and plan that and, you know, figure that out, because Sunday's message was all about, you know, it's painting that picture of sacrificial giving and what that looks like and what God asks of us a lot of times. And that's where we are right now as a church.
Yeah.
We couldn't have planned that in a million years if we had tried, you know, and so to see his timing, and then to see like the Halloween party that's happening on the 26th, when we're taking an offering on the 27th. So, you know, people get to come and serve the community and interact, and at the same time see the house, and all this is unfolding at the same, it just blows my mind to see how God is working in that and his timing of all of it.
Yeah. And again, it brings me back to that moment of like excitement to be a part of something that God's doing, you know? And I truly believe that, you know, God's going to do what God's going to do.
Yep, absolutely.
And whether we're a part of it is up to us, and whether we're obedient is up to us. So, it's gonna be super, super cool.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for just talking to me about this and maybe getting some details. I know there's a lot more to come and a lot more things that we don't really know yet. But you know, we're gonna be following in God's timing and in His way. So what are the kind of next steps? What are the what's gonna be happening, I guess, in our church, and just kind of to round this out?
You know, I think the biggest thing is just keeping in mind that we are taking an offering on the 27th. That's our next very specific step that we know, and that's to buy the house in Highland City. Obviously, if we move forward with the building expansion, which we are continuing to move forward in obedience, hoping and praying that we will, but there's still so many unknowns with that. I can't answer anything definitely, but if we move forward in that, you know, then there's probably going to be some kind of capital campaign or pledge campaign type of thing to help us rally our church family around that and make sure that we're not only making our mortgage payment, but really we want to be paying above and beyond what that minimum mortgage payment is every month, because part of our value that we've always held on to is we want to be out of debt. And so we know we're going to have to restructure our debt a little bit and add to our mortgage, which, in fact, those are details some people had asked the other night. We're currently carrying, I think it's around $280,000 in our mortgage on our property now, which we've decreased that significantly. We came in a little over $500,000 when we started on this property, so we've paid that way down. And our goal is to be debt free. So even as we restructure to do this expansion, our goal is keep paying more, pay that principal down so that we can get rid of that debt.
Right.
And we'll definitely work hard at that. But next step, that offering on the 27th, just be praying about what God asks of you. I really believe, and this past Sunday confirmed as we listened to the message, I believe God's going to ask some of us to really give sacrificially. Yeah. And I don't know what that looks like. You know, I like the other guy's example of, you know, the sacrificial giving is that's giving when it hurts. Yeah. You know, and that really is. It's, I think God's going to ask that of some of us, and it's going to take that to be able to accomplish what he's asking of us. But I also know that when he asks those things of us, he provides. And so just trusting in him and walking that journey and being obedient to whatever that is. And we're excited about the 27th. We're going to make that a big family day for us. You know, we're really going to celebrate as we do that offering, and we're still working out a couple of little pieces of the details. But the plan is to do that offering near the end of service. And we're going to bring all of our kids in to be with the families as well, bring our kids' workers in to be with it. I think our Spanish service is going to come over and join us. I was just talking with Ariel today, so I think that's even going to happen to where we can truly come together as an entire TBA family and do that together. And we're going to have some giving stations around the room. And it's not about trying to spotlight anybody or make anybody feel pressured to come and give, but we want to make this an act of worship where we come together as a family, we bring our gift, we take time as individual families to pray about the gift that we're giving and how God's going to use that and how he's going to bless with that. And then we're going to have some little tokens or reminders that people can take with them that just reminds them of what this is all about, that it's not just about a property, but it's about people. And so we're going to have a little token that you take with you that just reminds you this is about saving lives, and who are you praying for, and who are you wanting to reach with the gospel? Who are you pursuing? Because if we're not doing that, we're wasting our time and our money.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited. I think it's awesome that we get to be a part of it. So, I don't know. I just pray that everything, that people's hearts, I guess, are aligned, and that we're just obedient to what God wants us to do.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be an amazing, amazing thing that we talk about for another 10 years, and then another 10 years after that. So yeah, awesome. Thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, thanks for doing it.